I'm Andrew Morley. I'm the Operations Director of Property Solutions and also one of the founding directors. My role comprises many things, but principally key account management and management of the operational parts of the business, which include two work streams. Principal concern for tenants is value for money and the appropriateness of recovery. There's often a lack of transparency in the industry, and it's very difficult to make true comparisons of one building against another. And without there being transparency and having documentation accounts available, it's very difficult to validate costs incurred in the delivery of services and then to consider those in connection with the actual lease provisions related to the services which are to be delivered. In multi-tenanted buildings, there are common parts, and the lease will define the common parts, and there is also demised space. The demised space is held by the tenants, but service delivery is actually provided to both parts. Service charge concerns the delivery of services to the common parts and the recovery of the costs incurred in providing those services. However, a landlord will also deliver some services to demised space, and that's usually the subject of a separate direct charge to tenants. The issue which also needs to be recognised is the question of procurement, because organisations who hold space will be sourcing services and procuring contracts for service delivery to their own space separately. There is often a difference of need between landlord and tenant, particularly in mixed-use, multi-tenanted buildings. One of the difficulties is often different occupation hours. Leases do very often prescribe access hours. Many buildings, however, these days work on a 24/7 basis, but not all tenants occupy their space and work 24/7. If leases don't provide for that and there are only prescribed access hours, then clearly there may be a conflict because significant costs can be generated for out of access hours use of services. The challenge associated with multi-tenanted buildings is that tenants may hold leases for different terms. So, for example, we might have some tenants with a relatively short-term lease, others with a long-term lease. And the landlord and his agents are faced with often a challenge in terms of service delivery. And if that service delivery involves the replacement of plant or refurbishment of the common parts, then there is often a different requirement between those tenants. And it's a difficult issue to balance. The question of apportionment can often come into that. Because it's difficult for a tenant who has a short residual term to bear the costs of service provision, which clearly has a much longer perspective in mind. Leases are constantly evolving, and there are many model leases out there. There have been various attempts to produce a standard lease, but there isn't a standard lease which the industry has adopted. The RICS has taken significant steps in advancing the RICS code, and it would be good to see landlords embracing that and endorsing that within service charge provisions. There is, however, at the present time, a reluctance to endorse the code as an obligation of landlords and their agents as a means of determining management practice. Shorter leases can create quite a challenge for landlords as well as tenants. Tenants who take a short lease don't want to be burdened with a significant peak cost during a relatively short term. The way to equalise that would be to introduce some sort of fund. There has been a move in the market away from funds over many years because it was considered that the accounting practice associated with them and the potential exposure to corporation tax makes them very complicated. But with a shorter lease term, there is a need to try and equalise costs and avoid a tenant with a short term being burdened with high capital expenditure in one or more years. It's important if there is a sinking fund that it's properly understood, such that the purpose of the fund is prescribed, the term over which it's collected, that perhaps it should relate to services delivered only within the term, but the lease should consider that, and that the accounting methodology adopted is also clear. There should be transparency in terms of the sinking fund accounts and the management and administration of them.